The week Rishi Sunak vowed to get his Rwanda scheme back on track and stop the boats, GB News can reveal this morning that around 1,000 people have crossed in small boats in recent days. A break in the weather at the beginning of the week and again yesterday saw around 20 small boats make the crossing from France. Let's go now to GB News Home and Security Editor Mark White, who is in Dover with this breaking news for us. Mark.
I think this just shows, Tom, that whatever the government says about the fact that small boat crossing numbers are down compared to last year, and that is true, they're down about a third, anytime there is actually decent weather out in the channel, these boats will keep coming. And I think those that are keen channel watchers believe that the reduction in the number of small boats crossing the English Channel is down to the fact that we've had very unpredictable weather for most of the last year, really, with northerly winds blowing a lot of the time, which makes it difficult for these boats to get across from France to push off in the first place. But as I say, when those weather conditions improve, as they did yesterday and as they did at the beginning of the week, and again today, the weather conditions are pretty good out in the channel, and our intelligence is that a number of boats will be, according to contacts we have on the other side of the channel, kicking off from those beaches in France later on today to try to make it across to UK waters. So that's 1,000 at least so far this week, and we are right in the middle of winter now, well into November, and still the boats keep coming, Tom.
It's extraordinary because the government has been saying that it's got this multi-pronged approach, not least Rwanda, that deterrent being part of it, but also lots of other things. The money that we're giving France, the government say that more than 20,000 people have been stopped by French forces on the beaches there. Are you suggesting that perhaps the government's optimism about the other strands of its policy is misplaced, that actually what matters most of all here is the weather?
I think the weather plays a huge part in it, yes. It's true that the French are stopping boats from leaving their beaches. They did that last year as well. But all that happens, Tom, is these people aren't arrested and then detained or deported or anything like that. They are, some of them may be detained, most of them just scatter back into the dunes again to regroup and be put on another boat a day or two later when weather conditions improve. So all you're doing really in stopping those people coming across is delaying the inevitable in the vast majority of cases. These people will just regroup and try again. And it's such a lucrative industry for the criminal gangs involved in this. If they are charging 3,000 or so, it's between 3,000 and 5,000 to get on one of these boats. Well, there's more than 50 people go on a boat, so 150,000 at least they're making for each boat they push into the water. You can understand why the people smugglers are so determined to continue with this illegal trade, and of course they have got very sophisticated at it. They are able to procure the boats, get them manufactured to order in countries like China. They get shipped to Turkey. They then get smuggled from Turkey across into the European Union, up to the likes of Germany, where when they're ready to be sent to northwestern France, again they're shipped to the coast of northwestern France. They're blown up there on the beaches and they run to the water. As we said, some get stopped, but many don't, and they continue to head over here to the UK.
Mark, just going by numbers here, we're getting close to the end of the year. You're saying perhaps 1,000 people in the last few days coming across to the United Kingdom in small boats. Do you think that by the end of the year, the government will still be able to say this year arrivals are a third lower than last year, or might that number shift?
Well, I think that all really depends on the weather again. I think will be a big factor in this. November of last year, we had some really good fairly lengthy spells of decent weather, which meant that it was a very busy month in November. So if the same happens this month, if even in December there are some good days, then yes, that number will climb. It's about a third down on where we were at this time last year. It's possible it'll stay at that. It might even increase in the government's favour. But still, we're talking, Tom, the number of people that have come across since the 1st of January is 27,500 people who've come across the channel. So it might be down, but it's still a very significant problem. And these people still need to be accommodated in the likes of hotels. The government says it wants to get away from the over-reliance on hotels. But every time, if we had 500 come across yesterday and then 600 odd at the beginning of the week, they all need to be accommodated somewhere, and the alternative, the plan B in terms of accommodation, isn't properly functioning as yet. The BB Stockholm, after the issue with that outbreak of Legionella that was discovered in the water system there, they haven't come back en masse onto that boat yet. There's just a few people now back onto the BB Stockholm barge, and again with Wethersfield, there's only a couple of hundred of the supposed 1,700 in Wethersfield in Essex that are supposed to be at that old RAF base. And Scampton, we were supposed to have 2,000 people up in RAF Scampton. Not a single person has gone on to that particular former air base yet. So these people are being accommodated in the likes of hotels or council accommodation across the country.
Well, Mark White, thank you very much for bringing us the very latest there from Dover. We'll be back with you throughout the programme as we get more information on any more boats. Well, I'm joined now in the studio by political commentator John Oxley. And John, I suppose when the Prime Minister first made this pledge, stood at the podium with the words "Stop the boats" beneath him, people would have assumed that meant stop every boat. It's probably not good enough for Rishi Sunak to keep saying this phrase that the number of crossings are down by a third.
That's exactly right, Tom. When you make a big pledge like that, particularly when you make it one of your key priorities, you're saying to the public, we're going to fix this problem, not we're going to make it slightly better. And particularly, as your Mark was saying, a big part of that has been the weather's not been great. And so there's every chance that come next spring, potentially when there's election, or through the summer running up to an election in the autumn, we'll have weeks and weeks of really sunny weather, and then suddenly it will not just be an increase on this year, it will be an increase on last year, which was the biggest ever year. And that's going to be very embarrassing for the Prime Minister who said stop the boats.
And this is a real risk in terms of when the Prime Minister decides to go for a general election. There's, I think, perhaps a consensus that the Prime Minister wants to leave it a bit later than the spring, perhaps October, perhaps November. The very latest he could go would be mid-January, but I think that might be a bit too much for anyone to bear, campaigning over Christmas. What do you think that the idea that there might be more crossings over the summer might do to that calculation of when a general election might come?
I think it's one of those things that you would potentially you go earlier if you've got this is a big problem on the horizon. If your experts are saying actually this year is going to be really bad, you maybe go for May before that problem's ramped up. Because if you hang on over the summer, you go into the autumn, that data will have come in. But the other thing is the Prime Minister needs to balance that around some of the other key priorities that could be a big electoral problem for him. Another one is NHS waiting times. Those are still going up. If you go into sort of October, November, December, as we're seeing at the moment, that is the sort of winter peak time for the NHS. Those lists expand, people get sick because it's winter, people's bills go up because if heating costs remain high, that's when your heating bills go up. So it's a really difficult calculation. And frankly, when you're losing this badly in the polls and you're doing this badly against your own priorities, there's not many good answers.
When GB News came out at the start of this week with a poll showing the Conservative Party on 20%, I think a lot of people scoffed at it, thinking they're not that low, this is inflating the Reform Party or whatever. But now 4 more polls have come out showing the Conservative Party at 19, 20, 21 and 22% respectively. It seems that the Conservative Party has been declining in the polls in the last 7 days, perhaps after that reshuffle.
I think that's true. I mean, the best guidance always with polls is you don't look at individual polls, you look at trends and see how they're moving overall. And so whether it's 19 or 21% is kind of immaterial. What you're seeing is it is getting worse again for the Tories. It's back to those sort of numbers. And potentially that's something around the reshuffle. Potentially it's just as time goes on for Rishi Sunak, he's made these pledges, he's not delivering against them. All those other things are kicking off as well. You know, NHS waiting times are really bad at the moment.
And yet this is the week that Rishi Sunak has been trumpeting his first pledge, halving inflation, has actually been achieved. I suppose this goes into this perennial dilemma. If something is written down before you, do you feel like it's true rather than you can just see it there on the paper?
Yeah, that's definitely an issue, and particularly for the thing around inflation, you know, we need to remember that's about how much prices are going up by. The increases already have been locked in, and I think for most people, most voters, you're going to the supermarket and you're seeing milk, bread, eggs, twice the price they were 2 years ago. Your rent has gone up, maybe your mortgage has gone up. You're not thinking, oh, well, now it's only going up at a slower rate. That's great, I'm going to go out and vote Tory. You're thinking, well, I get paid this much and I'm spending more and more of it on the daily essentials. Maybe it is time for a change.
And that is the phrase that I think focus groups have been coming up with now for quite some time. This idea that the government has had quite a long time to try and fix these problems, and that something else, and that it is time for a change. Rishi Sunak lent into that in October, at the start of October, with his conference speech saying, "I'm the change candidate." He seems to be walking back from that pitch now. Do you think someone in Number 10 has said, Prime Minister, trying to say that you're the change candidate sounds a little bit silly?
I think that very well may have happened, because it is bizarre when your party has been in power for 13 years, you yourself have been at the top table for a few years now, coming out and saying, I'm the change, not just from a few years ago, but from the past 30 years. It does seem a bit odd. And I think also what's going on with that is, the Conservatives were more popular in the past. Maybe change isn't what people are looking for. And I think that's one of the interesting things about David Cameron coming back. Is it a chance to try and say, particularly in those seats where the Tories fear the Lib Dems, actually, no, we're the guys you backed in 2010 when we did well, in 2015 when we won a majority. Maybe sort of a more sort of back to the future type message, rather than we're going to radically change things again.